the sea had finally gone quiet. Smoke thinned into pale ribbons, and the rolling water returned to its old rhythm, as if nothing violent had ever touched it. The captured ship drifted without purpose, its torn sails hanging like tired wings. On the deck, the female pirates sat in a line, wrists bound, ankles aching, skin still warm from the sun and the memory of battle. They had lived most of their lives in motion. Waves, wind, rope, and what had been their home. Now stillness felt heavier than chains. Each breath seemed louder than the last. The guards spoke in low voices, careful and distant, as if afraid the women might vanish if spoken to directly. No one announced what would happen next. That was the hardest part. Uncertainty pressed against the mind more cruelly than hunger. The women watched the horizon, hoping the sea might still recognize them and intervene. But the sea only shimmered, calm and indifferent. Some of them had chosen piracy out of hunger. Others out of anger. A few because the land had closed its doors, offering no place to belong. At sea, they had found a strange equality. Rope burned hands without caring who held it. Storms did not ask for permission. On deck, strength mattered more than stories. Now, captured, their stories were suddenly all that mattered to the men who held them. Whispers traveled between guards. Curiosity mixed with judgment. Female pirates were rare, and rarity often invited cruelty disguised as fascination. Below deck, the air smelled of salt, iron, and damp wood. The women were guided down one by one. Each step echoed like a countdown. The space was small, but not dark. Light filtered through cracks, illuminating floating dust. It felt like a waiting room for a future no one had explained. One woman pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. She remembered the first time she stepped onto a ship. The fear had been sharp, but clean. This fear was slower. It wrapped itself around the thoughts and stayed. Another woman watched a drop of water fall from a beam, counting the seconds between each fall. Time had become something fragile, something that could stretch or snap without warning. Above them, the ship turned toward land. They could feel it in the change of movement. The waves shifted. The rhythm changed. The sea, which had once carried them freely, was now delivering them somewhere else. No one spoke. Silence became a shared language. It was the last thing they still owned. As the shoreline grew closer, gulls cried overhead. Their voices were sharp, almost mocking. Land appeared slowly, solid and unmoving. The sight filled the women with a strange mix of relief and grief. Land meant answers. Land also meant endings. They did not yet know that capture was not the end of their story. It was only the moment when their lives would be rewritten by hands that had never held a sail. The port smelled of fish, sweat, and old stone. Crowds gathered quickly, drawn by rumor and spectacle. Female pirates were marched through narrow streets, heads held level, chains clinking with each step. Some people stared with open mouths. Others looked away, uncomfortable with what did not fit their understanding of the world. The women were placed in holding cells near the docks. The walls were cold, the floor uneven. Light came through a single barred window. Time slowed again, thick and heavy. Officials came and went. Questions were asked, but not truly heard. Names were demanded, yet written down incorrectly or not at all. Their pasts were reduced to a few careless lines. Pirate. Criminal. Example. The problem was not only punishment. It was erasure. Their choices, their reasons, their losses were stripped away. The system had no space for complexity. It preferred clear labels and clean conclusions. Some guards were cruel. Others were simply tired. A few showed quiet kindness, offering water or loosening a chain when no one was watching. These small acts carried weight. They reminded the women that humanity still existed, even in narrow spaces. Days passed. Or maybe weeks. It was hard to tell. Meals came at irregular times. Sleep was shallow. Dreams brought back the sound of waves and the feel of rope sliding through hands. Waking was the hardest part. Eventually, decisions were made. Not all fates were the same. Some women were sentenced to forced labor. Others were marked for transportation to distant colonies. A few faced public punishment meant to warn others. The announcements were delivered without emotion. Names were called, or descriptions used when names were missing. Each decision landed like a stone in water, sending ripples of fear and relief at the same time. Relief that something was decided. Fear of what that decision meant. One woman was separated from the others and led away. She did not resist. She simply looked back once, her expression calm but full. That look stayed behind long after she was gone. The remaining women sat closer together. They shared warmth, shared silence. They remembered the sea together, speaking of it softly, like a friend who might hear them if spoken to gently enough. In the nights, they listened to the sounds of the port. Footsteps. Distant laughter. The creak of ships leaving without them. Each sound reminded them that the world continued, indifferent to their pause. They began to understand that survival now required a different kind of strength. Not the strength to climb or fight, but the strength to endure being misunderstood. Their lives were no longer measured in miles sailed, but in days endured. And still, somewhere deep inside, the sea remained, steady and patient, waiting to be remembered. Change came quietly. Not as mercy, but as exhaustion. The system that judged them grew tired of its own harshness. Paperwork was lost. Sentences were shortened. Some decisions were quietly altered. A few women were sent to work near the water, repairing nets or cleaning docks. The smell of salt returned to their hands. The sound of waves came back into their days. It was not freedom, but it was familiar. One woman was assigned to a household near the port. Her work was simple. Cooking. Cleaning. Watching the sea from a small window while stirring a pot. The rhythm was different, but not entirely cruel. Another was placed in a distant settlement. The journey was long. The land was rough. But the people there needed help more than they needed punishment. Slowly, trust formed. Slowly, the past loosened its grip. Not all stories ended gently. Some women disappeared into hard labor and were never heard from again. Their absence was a quiet wound carried by those who remained. For the others, time worked its slow magic. Anger softened into memory. Fear became caution. The sharp edges of survival smoothed into something like hope. They learned that capture had not erased who they were. It had only forced them to change shape. The sea was still inside them, even if they never touched it again. Sometimes, they gathered near the shore at dusk. They watched the horizon turn gold and then gray. They did not speak much. They did not need to. The sea understood silence. They began to tell their stories differently. Not as crimes, but as journeys. Not as shame, but as proof of endurance. The world might never fully listen, but they listened to each other. In small ways, they reclaimed choice. Choosing kindness where bitterness would have been easier. Choosing patience where anger had once lived. The twist was not freedom. It was something quieter. It was survival with dignity. Years passed. The port changed. Ships came and went. New stories replaced old ones. Female pirates became rumors again, half-believed and poorly remembered. The women aged. Lines formed around eyes that had once scanned horizons. Hands grew rough from different kinds of work. But when they stood near the sea, something in them straightened. They had learned that punishment could not fully take what the sea had given them. Independence had settled too deeply. Some taught children near the docks how to read the sky for weather. Others warned young sailors about storms, not just of wind, but of choices. Their advice was practical, calm, earned. They did not seek forgiveness. They sought peace. When they spoke of the past, it was without drama. Capture had been terrible, yes. But it had also revealed something unexpected. The ability to endure without losing softness. At the end of their lives, many were buried near the water. No markers told their full stories. The waves passed over their resting places, again and again, patient and endless. What happened to them after capture did leave people speechless, but not for the reasons expected. There were no simple horrors to point to, no single ending to summarize. There was only the truth that even when freedom is taken, identity can survive. Even when the sea is lost, it can still live inside a person. The storm ended. What remained was quieter, stronger, and deeply human.